The key felt heavier than it should have, cold metal pressing into my palm as I stood in the marble lobby of the tallest building in Chicago's financial district. My father and sister were already there, waiting like vultures, and I knew what was coming. I never thought I would be standing here, in the gleaming lobby of the Thornhill Tower on South Wacker Drive, holding the keys to an empire I built from absolutely nothing. But before I tell you about the victory, you need to understand the war. You need to know what it feels like to be erased by the people who were supposed to love you most. My name is Riley Thorne, and for 28 years, I was the family disappointment. The black sheep. The one who threw away a promising future at Northwestern University to chase what my father called childish fantasies. I dropped out halfway through my junior year to pursue graphic design, and that decision became the ammunition my family used against me for nearly a decade. The lobby was arctic that morning, all polished stone and floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel simultaneously exposed and insignificant. I had dressed carefully, a simple black blazer over a cream silk blouse, dark jeans, and boots that gave me just enough height to look my father in the eye. Not that it ever mattered. Richard Thorne had a way of making you feel small no matter how tall you stood. He was there with Brittany, my older sister by 2 years, both of them positioned near the security desk like they owned the place. In a way, they thought they did. My father had been courting the building's owner for months, trying to secure office space for his consulting firm's expansion. Brittany, his faithful second-in-command, had been handling the negotiations. They had no idea I had already closed the deal. For the entire building, I saw Brittany notice me first. Her perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up, and she elbowed our father, whispering something that made his expression shift from bored impatience to active disdain. They both turned to face me as I crossed the lobby, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Brittany called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness that carried across the marble expanse. She was wearing a burgundy suit that probably cost more than my first car, her highlighted hair swept into an elegant chignon. "Our poor little sister. Here to window shop? Riley, sweetheart, do you really think you can afford office space in a building like this? What are you going to use? That credit card that's probably maxed out?" A few people in the lobby turned to look. That was always Brittany's specialty, making sure there was an audience for my humiliation. I kept walking, my face carefully neutral. Even as my heart hammered against my ribs, my father stepped forward, his 6'2" frame imposing in his charcoal Tom Ford suit. At 60, Richard Thorne still commanded attention, his silver hair perfectly styled, his presence filling the room. "Riley, what are you doing here?" His voice was loud enough to ensure everyone nearby could hear. "Who are you trying to embarrass? You don't belong in a place like this. Go back to that rundown studio of yours in Wicker Park and play with your crayons." I stopped about 10 feet away from them, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to maintain my dignity. The realtor, a nervous-looking man in his 30s named Marcus Chen, was hovering near the elevator bank, clutching a leather portfolio against his chest like a shield. "I'm here to pick up my keys," I said simply, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Brittany laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Your keys? Riley, this is getting pathetic. You can't just walk into a luxury building and pretend you belong here. This is for serious professionals, not starving artists who couldn't even finish college." I turned to Marcus, ignoring my sister completely. "Mr. Chen, could you please give me the keys we discussed?" Marcus looked between me and my father, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Then, with shaking hands, he reached into his portfolio and pulled out a single key on a heavy brass keyring engraved with the building's name and logo. He crossed the space between us and placed it in my outstretched hand. "Congratulations, Miss Thorne," he said quietly, his voice almost apologetic. "The entire building is yours." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched my father's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then a fury so profound, it turned his face an alarming shade of red. Brittany's mouth literally fell open, her expensive lipstick suddenly making her look like a gasping fish. "What did you just say?" my father demanded, rounding on Marcus. "The entire building? That's impossible. We've been negotiating for 3 months. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne," Marcus stammered. "But Miss Thorne here made an offer 6 weeks ago that the ownership group couldn't refuse. The sale closed yesterday. I thought you knew." I closed my fingers around the key, feeling its weight, its reality. "Thank you, Marcus. I'll meet with you on Monday to finalize the remaining paperwork." I turned to face my family. "Would you like to see my office? I have some time before my next meeting." Brittany found her voice first. "This is insane. You're lying. You're both lying. There's no way you could afford this building. What did you do? Rob a bank? Or did you finally find some rich old man to fund your delusions?" Something cold settled in my chest, pushing out the last remnants of the girl who used to cry herself to sleep after family dinners where I was the punchline of every joke. No rich old man. No bank robbery. Just hard work and a company that your precious networks never bothered to notice because you were too busy looking down your noses at me. My father stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. Explain yourself, now. Top floor, I said, gesturing toward the elevators. Unless you'd rather continue this conversation in the lobby. They followed me because they had no choice. Pride and disbelief propelled them into the private elevator that served only the penthouse level. I used my new key to activate it, and we rode up in suffocating silence. Brittany kept staring at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe I had always been a stranger to them, someone they never bothered to actually know. The elevator opened directly into what would become my office suite. 52nd floor, corner unit with wraparound windows showcasing the entire city. Lake Michigan glittered in the morning sun to the east, and to the west, the Chicago skyline stretched out like a promise. The space was still mostly empty, just the bones of what would become my headquarters, but the potential was staggering. Brittany walked to the windows as if in a trance. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" I moved to the center of the room, my voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "Because it seems pretty real to me." My father was pacing, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood. "How? You dropped out of school. You've been living in that dump above a coffee shop. You drive a 12-year-old Honda. Where did this money come from?" "The dump above the coffee shop was my first office," I said calmly. "And I kept the Honda because it runs fine and I didn't need to impress anyone. The money came from Ascension Studios, the graphic design company I founded 5 years ago, the one you refused to take seriously, the one you told me would fail within 6 months." "A graphic design company," Brittany scoffed, but her voice lacked its usual bite. She was rattled, and I was savoring every second of it. "You expect us to believe you bought a downtown high-rise with logo designs?" I pulled out my tablet from my messenger bag, the one luxury I had allowed myself before this, and pulled up my portfolio. I turned it to face them, swiping through the projects that had built my empire. Not logos, brand identities, complete digital transformations, user experience overhauls. I built Ascension by working 16-hour days while you were at cocktail parties. I slept in my office for 2 years. I taught myself coding, animation, digital marketing, and I got lucky. Really, really lucky. The tablet displayed a feature from Forbes about rising tech companies in the Midwest. Ascension Studios was prominently featured, with my photo and a glowing write-up about our innovative approach to digital branding. 3 years ago, we landed a contract with a startup in Silicon Valley, I continued, my voice steady and professional, like I was giving a boardroom presentation. They wanted a complete rebrand before their Series A funding. I gave them something unique, something that told their story. They got their funding, and they told their friends. Then those friends told their friends. Now we have contracts with 15 major tech companies, 4 Fortune 500 corporations, and 3 international brands you would definitely recognize. I swiped to another screen, showing a spreadsheet of revenue. The numbers were staggering, even to me sometimes. Last year, Ascension Studios grossed $47 million. This year, we're on track for $75 million. I bought this building because I needed a headquarters, and because I could. The entire purchase was cash. My father sank into one of the folding chairs left behind by the construction crew, his face pale. Brittany was still at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "You're telling me," my father said slowly, "that you built a multi-million-dollar company. You, the girl who couldn't even commit to finishing a degree." The old hurt tried to surface, but I pushed it down. "I'm telling you that I built this without you, without your money, without your connections, without your approval. I built this because you taught me that I would never be good enough for the Thorne family. So I stopped trying to be a thorn and started being myself." "This is temporary," Brittany said suddenly, spinning around to face me. "Companies like this, they rise fast and fall faster. You have no experience, no business education. You'll crash and burn, and then what? You'll come crawling back, begging Dad to bail you out." "Will I?" I walked to the window, standing next to her, both of us looking out at the city that had watched me struggle and scrape and finally soar. When have I ever asked Dad for help? When I needed money for art supplies in high school, what did he tell me? When I wanted to go to design school instead of business school, what did you tell me? When I started my company and asked if you knew anyone who might need design work, what was your response? Brittany's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. "Dad told me to get a real job. You told me I was wasting everyone's time. And when I dropped out of Northwestern to focus on my business, you both told me I was dead to you. Remember that, Brittany? You literally said those words. You said I was an embarrassment, and you didn't want anyone knowing we were related." "We were trying to motivate you," my father said weakly. "No," I corrected. "You were trying to control me, and when you couldn't, you tried to break me. But I'm not broken. I'm standing in my building, in my city, running my company. And the only thing that breaks my heart is that it took me this long to realize I never needed your validation." The elevator chimed, and my assistant, Jamie, stepped out. Jamie was 24, sharp as a tack, with close-cropped purple hair and enough ambition to power a small city. They had been with me for 3 years, rising from intern to my right hand. "Riley," Jamie said, glancing at my family with barely concealed curiosity. "Your call with the LA partners starts in 5 minutes." And David Chen's office called. "He wants to know if you're free for dinner this Friday. He's flying in from San Francisco, specifically to meet with you." My father's head snapped up. "David Chen? The David Chen from Chen Technologies?" "The same," I confirmed. David Chen was a legend in the tech world, a billionaire by 30 who had revolutionized cloud computing. "We're discussing a potential merger. He wants to bring Ascension's design philosophy to his entire portfolio of companies." Brittany looked like she might be sick. She had been trying to get a meeting with David Chen for years for our father's firm, and he had never returned her calls. "I need to take this call," I said, my tone making it clear this conversation was over. "Marcus will be in touch about your negotiations. I'm sure we can find some available office space for Dad's firm. Maybe something on the 16th floor. It has nice northern light." "You're enjoying this," my father said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Hurt? Anger? Regret?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm not enjoying this at all. I wish things had been different. I wish you had believed in me. I wish I had felt like I mattered to you as something other than a disappointment. But they weren't, and you didn't, and I didn't, so I moved on. I suggest you do the same." I turned to Jamie. "Can you show my guests out? I'll take the call in the conference room." As I walked away, I heard Brittany call after me. "You think you're so much better than us now? You think money changes who you are?" I stopped, looked back over my shoulder. "No, Brittany, money didn't change who I am, but it sure as hell revealed who you are. And honestly, I'm grateful. Because now I know exactly what I don't want to become." The weeks that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and the intoxicating rush of success. I hired a full staff for the new office, recruited top talent from across the country, and watched Ascension Studios transform from my scrappy startup into a legitimate powerhouse. The media attention was overwhelming. Local business journals wanted interviews, design magazines featured our work. I was invited to speak at conferences, to sit on panels, to mentor young entrepreneurs. And through it all, my family was conspicuously silent, until they weren't. The invitation came on thick, expensive cardstock. An art gallery opening in River North, a fundraiser for arts education. It was exactly the kind of event Brittany loved, where she could network and be seen and play the role of cultured philanthropist. I almost threw it away, but something made me RSVP yes. I wore a dress I had been saving, deep emerald silk that cost more than my first month's rent in that apartment above the coffee shop. I had my hair professionally styled, soft waves that made me look older, more polished. I wanted armor, and expensive clothes were the best armor I knew. The gallery was packed with Chicago's elite, the walls lined with paintings I could now actually afford to buy. I was nursing a glass of champagne, discussing a potential collaboration with a gallery owner, when I felt eyes on me. Brittany and my father were across the room, staring. They looked shocked to see me there, which was almost funny considering the invitation had been addressed to me personally. The gallery owner knew who I was, knew what Ascension had become. My father approached first, navigating through the crowd with his practiced social grace. "Riley," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "You look wonderful. It's good to see you out and about." Out and about. Like I was a recluse who had finally emerged from hiding. "Mr. Thorne," I replied, keeping my tone professional. "Brittany, enjoying the exhibit?" Brittany had that calculating look I knew so well. "We should have dinner," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "The three of us. It's been too long since we've really talked." "Has it?" I took a sip of my champagne. I hadn't noticed. "Don't be like that," my father said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. "You've done well for yourself, Riley. I'm proud of you. We both are." The words I had waited years to hear, and they felt hollow. Worse than hollow. They felt transactional. "Are you proud that I succeeded?" I asked quietly, "or proud that I succeeded enough to be useful to you?" My father had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You ignored me for years. You told me I would fail. You actively hoped I would fail so you could say I told you so. And now that I haven't, now that I'm successful enough to be seen with, suddenly you want family dinners?" "We're still family," Brittany insisted. "Family forgives." "Does it?" I set down my champagne glass on a nearby table. "Because I don't remember much forgiveness when I needed it. I remember a lot of judgment, a lot of criticism, a lot of doors closing in my face." "Let's talk about this somewhere private," my father said, glancing around at the crowd, always worried about appearances. "Fine, dinner. But I choose the place." That's how I ended up at the Aviary 3 days later, sitting across from my father and sister in one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. The cocktails here were art installations, The food was molecular gastronomy that bordered on pretentious, and the prices were astronomical. I had reserved the private dining room, a glass-enclosed space that overlooked the city. My father looked uncomfortable in a way I had never seen before. Brittany kept fidgeting with her napkin. I sipped a cocktail that cost $70 and tasted like smoke and cherries and waited. "We need to discuss the future," my father finally said after the appetizers arrived. "Your future, and potentially ours as well." "My future seems pretty clear," I replied. "I'm expanding Ascension to 3 more cities. We're opening offices in Austin, Seattle, and possibly New York. What's unclear about that?" "You need guidance," Brittany interjected. "You're successful, obviously, but you're still young, inexperienced. You don't have the business background to sustain this growth." I set down my fork carefully. "And you do?" "I have an MBA from Kellogg," Brittany said defensively. "I've been working in business development for 8 years. "Working for Dad," I corrected, "which is different from building something yourself." My father cleared his throat. "Riley, what Brittany is trying to say is that we'd like to help. I have connections, resources. We could bring tremendous value to Ascension. Perhaps you could bring us on as consultants. Or better yet, Brittany could come on board as COO. She could handle operations while you focus on the creative side." And there it was. The real reason for this dinner. They didn't want to reconcile. They wanted a piece of what I had built. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "You want me to hand over operational control of my company to someone who has never built anything themselves? Someone who told me just 3 months ago that I would crash and burn?" "I was trying to protect you," Brittany protested. "No, you were trying to diminish me, just like you always have. I'm not smart enough, not experienced enough, not good enough. Except, now that I'm successful, suddenly I need to share that success with you?" "We're family," my father said, his voice hardening. "That should mean something." "It does mean something," I agreed. "It means I know exactly who you are. And I know that if I let you into my company, you'll spend every day trying to prove you're the ones who made it successful. You'll take credit for my work, my vision, my sleepless nights and bleeding hands. You'll rewrite history to make yourselves the heroes and me the lucky idiot who stumbled into success." "That's not true," Brittany said, but her voice lacked conviction. I stood up, leaving my barely touched entree on the table. "Do you know what the worst part is? I spent so many years desperately wanting your approval, wanting you to see me, to believe in me. And now that I have everything I ever wanted, I realize I don't want your approval anymore. I don't need it, and I definitely don't need your help." "Sit down. Riley," my father commanded, using the voice that used to make me flinch. "Don't make a scene." "Why not?" I asked, picking up my wine glass. "You never had a problem making me the scene when it suited you. Remember Thanksgiving? When you told all your friends that I had dropped out because I couldn't handle the academic pressure? Or Christmas when you told me not to come because you didn't want to explain my failure to the rest of the family?" Brittany's face flushed. "We were disappointed. Parents are allowed to be disappointed." "You were cruel," I corrected. "There's a difference. And you taught me something valuable, even if you didn't mean to. You taught me that I don't need people who only want me when I'm useful to them. I don't need people who love me conditionally. I don't need people who see my success as their opportunity." I raised my glass, looking at both of them. "So here's to family. The one I was born into and the one I chose. Thank you for teaching me the difference." I drank the wine, set down the glass, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear my father calling my name, Brittany's chair scraping back, but I didn't turn around. I kept walking through the restaurant, past the curious stares, past the maitre d', out into the Chicago night. The driver I had hired for the evening was waiting. "Where to, Miss Thorne?" "The lake," I said. "Navy Pier." I sat on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan, the city lights reflecting on the dark water, and felt something inside me finally break free. I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to be good enough. I cried for the teenager who had believed her worth was tied to her father's pride. I cried for the young woman who had nearly given up on her dreams because the people who should have supported her told her she was foolish. And then I stopped crying. I pulled out my phone and texted Jamie. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow. I need to start something new." "Everything okay?" Jamie replied immediately. "Everything's perfect. I just figured out what I want to do next." The next morning, I started the Riley Thorne Foundation. Its mission: to provide grants, mentorship, and resources to young artists and entrepreneurs who had been told they weren't good enough, who had been discouraged by their families, their schools, their communities, who needed someone to believe in them the way I had needed someone to believe in me. I threw myself into the work. We funded art programs in underprivileged schools. We gave microloans to startups founded by women and minorities. We created mentorship networks that connected struggling creatives with successful professionals. It became as important to me as Ascension, maybe more so. My father and Brittany tried to reach out a few more times. Emails that went unanswered. Phone calls that went to voicemail. An invitation to Brittany's birthday party that I politely declined. Each attempt felt more desperate, and I felt increasingly nothing. Not anger, not hurt. Just a peaceful indifference that came from finally understanding that their opinion of me had never been about me at all. It had been about their own insecurities, their own need to feel superior, their own fear that if I succeeded without them, it would expose how little they had actually accomplished on their own merit. 6 months after the dinner at the aviary, my assistant knocked on my office door with an unusual expression. "You have a visitor," Jamie said carefully. "It's your father. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I considered turning him away, but curiosity won out. "Send him in." Richard Thorne looked like he had aged a decade and half a year. His suit, while still expensive, hung a little looser on his frame. His hair seemed more gray than silver now. He stood in my doorway, and I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Defeat. "Riley," he said. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "You have 15 minutes. I have a board meeting after this." He sat, and for a long moment, he just looked around my office. The walls were covered with framed magazine covers, awards, photos of me with clients and colleagues. Evidence of a life well lived, a success well earned. "The firm is in trouble," he said finally. "We lost 3 major clients in the last quarter. One of them specifically cited concerns about leadership. The others just said they were going in a different direction." I waited. "Brittany wants me to ask you for help. She thinks you could, I don't know, use your connections, put in a good word. Maybe we could collaborate on something." "Is that what you want?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, I came to apologize." Of all the things I expected, that wasn't one of them. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Go on." "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough. "About everything. About you, about what you were capable of, about what success looks like. I spent 30 years building a company that I thought defined me, and I was so terrified of you finding a different path that I tried to sabotage you. I tried to make you small so I could feel big." "Why?" I asked. "Why was my failure so important to you?" He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because your mother believed in you. She always believed in you, even when I didn't. And when she got sick, when she was dying, she made me promise to support you, to let you find your own way, and I promised her I would. And then she died, and I was so angry at losing her that I took it out on you. Every time I looked at you, I saw her faith, her hope, her certainty that you would be extraordinary. And I hated it because it reminded me that she was gone." I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "That's not an excuse." "No," he agreed. "It's not. It's just the truth. A shameful, ugly truth. You deserved better than I gave you. You deserved a father who championed you instead of one who tried to clip your wings." "I did," I said simply. He nodded, accepting the judgment. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. I just needed you to know that you were right. About all of it. About me, about Brittany, about what we did to you. And I'm sorry." I stood up, walked to the window. Below, Chicago hummed with life and possibility. My city. My kingdom. Built one design at a time, one client at a time, one impossible dream at a time. "When I was 20, I said, still looking out the window, "all I wanted was for you to tell me you were proud of me. I would have given anything to hear those words and believe them. I measured my worth by whether you thought I was worthy." "And now?" he asked quietly. "Now I know my worth has nothing to do with you." I turned to face him. "I'm not going to help your company. I'm not going to use my connections on your behalf. Not because I want to punish you, but because your business struggles aren't my responsibility. You built something, and if it fails, that's on you to fix." He stood, nodding slowly. "I understand. But," I continued, "I appreciate the apology. I don't know if I can ever forgive you completely. Too much time has passed, too much hurt accumulated. But I can let it go. I can stop carrying the weight of your disappointment, and maybe that's enough." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Riley. I hope you know that. She saw this in you when you were just a little girl with a crayon and a big imagination." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about my mother. She had died when I was 19, breast cancer that moved too fast for the doctors to stop. She had been my champion, my believer, the one person who never doubted I could do anything I set my mind to. I pulled up the foundation's website on my computer, looking at the latest batch of grant applications. Teenagers who wanted to study art, young adults starting businesses from their bedrooms, dreamers who needed someone to say, "Yes, you can," when everyone else was saying, "No, you can't." "I'm doing this for you, Mom," I whispered to the empty office. "And for the girl I used to be, and for every kid who's being told they're not enough." That evening, I stood on the deck of the yacht I had bought myself for my 29th birthday. It wasn't large or ostentatious, just a beautiful 40-foot sailboat named Second Wind. I had learned to sail that summer, spending weekends on Lake Michigan, finding peace in the rhythm of wind and water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The Chicago skyline rose behind me, my building visible among the cluster of towers. From here, you could see the whole scope of it, the magnitude of what I had built. My phone buzzed. A text from Brittany. "Can we talk? I know Dad came to see you. I want to explain." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me, the part that still remembered being sisters before the competition and cruelty, wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, we could find our way back to something resembling a relationship. But the stronger part, the part that had learned to protect herself, knew better. Brittany hadn't changed. She was just scared, watching her own carefully constructed life start to crack. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted insurance. I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I called Jamie. "Hey, can you add something to tomorrow's schedule? I want to visit that high school in Englewood, the one whose art program we're funding." "Absolutely," Jamie replied. "Any particular reason?" "I want to talk to the kids. Tell them my story. Show them that you can come from nothing and build something extraordinary. That the people who doubt you don't define you." "You're going to make me cry," Jamie said, and I could hear the smile in their voice. "That's the plan." I hung up and looked back at the city. Somewhere in one of those buildings, my father and sister were probably strategizing, planning their next move, trying to figure out how to salvage what they had built on a foundation of fear and control. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't wish them ill. I simply didn't need them to be anything other than what they were, people who had taught me what I didn't want to become. The water lapped against the hull of the boat, a soothing rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. I had spent so many years fighting to prove myself, to earn a place in a family that didn't want me, to measure up to standards that were designed to keep me down. And then I had stopped fighting them and started fighting for myself. I had stopped trying to fit into their definition of success and created my own. I had stopped waiting for permission to be extraordinary and given myself permission instead. The foundation would continue to grow. Ascension would continue to thrive. I would continue to build and create and dream, not because I had something to prove, but because this was who I was meant to be. I thought about that girl in the lobby of the building, 3 months ago, terrified but determined. I thought about the key heavy in her palm and the moment she decided to stop being small to make other people comfortable. I smiled, raising my glass of wine to the setting sun, to the city, to the future I had built with my own hands. "Here's to breaking free," I said to the wind. "Here's to becoming exactly who you were meant to be." The sun slipped below the horizon, and the city lights began to glow, thousands of windows lighting up like stars, and I stood on my boat, in my city, living my life, finally, blessedly free. I had won, not by destroying them, but by building something they could never touch, never diminish, never take away. I had won by becoming someone I was proud to be, regardless of whether anyone else was proud of me, and in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. The weeks turned into months, and life settled into a rhythm I had never imagined possible. Ascension continued to grow beyond my wildest projections. We landed contracts with 2 more Fortune 500 companies and expanded our international presence to London and Tokyo. The foundation gave out its 100th grant, and I got to personally hand the check to a 17-year-old girl from the South Side who wanted to study animation. She reminded me so much of myself at that age that I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to cry. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, just dinners and concerts and the occasional weekend getaway. I made real friends, people who knew me as Riley the designer, Riley the entrepreneur, Riley the patron of the arts. Not Riley the disappointment, not Riley the failure, just Riley. I bought my first house, a renovated brownstone in Lincoln Park with big windows and a studio space that got perfect northern light. I filled it with art from local galleries, furniture I chose myself, books I actually wanted to read. Every corner of it felt like me, reflected who I had become. 1 year after that confrontation in the lobby, I received an invitation to speak at Northwestern's graduation ceremony. The irony wasn't lost on me. The university I had left in disgrace now wanted me to inspire their graduates. I almost declined, but then I thought about all the students sitting in that audience who might feel like they didn't fit the traditional mold, who might be questioning their path, who might need to hear that there were multiple routes to success. I accepted. Standing at the podium in my purple graduation robe, honorary doctorate in hand, I looked out at thousands of faces. Somewhere in the crowd, I knew my father and Brittany might be watching. They had been invited as part of my guest list, though I hadn't heard if they planned to attend. "I left this university 7 years ago," I began, my voice amplified across the outdoor venue. "I left because I couldn't reconcile what I was being taught with what I felt called to do. I left because traditional success, the kind measured in degrees and corner offices and climbing corporate ladders, felt like wearing someone else's clothes. They fit fine, but they weren't mine." I told them about the coffee shop apartment, about the 16-hour days, about the rejection and doubt. I told him about building something from nothing, about learning to trust my own vision even when no one else could see it. The people who loved me thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life, I said, and maybe I was. Maybe I got lucky. Maybe the next person who makes the same choice I did will fail spectacularly. But I learned something crucial in those years of struggle. Your worth isn't determined by other people's expectations. Your success doesn't have to look like anyone else's, and the opinion that matters most is the one you have of yourself. After the ceremony, as I was walking back to my car, I heard someone call my name. I turned to find Brittany standing alone near the chapel, still in her guest attire, a pale blue dress and matching jacket. She looked different somehow. Smaller, maybe. Or perhaps I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. "That was a good speech," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Mom would have loved it." The mention of our mother caught me off guard. Brittany rarely talked about her. "Thank you." "I'm not going to ask for anything," Brittany said quickly, as if she could read my defensive posture. "I just wanted to say that I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About me living in Dad's shadow, about never taking risks. You were right." I waited, curious where this was going. "I quit," she continued. 3 months ago. I left Dad's firm and started my own consulting company. It's small, nothing like what you've built, but it's mine. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that matters to me, not just something that looks good on paper." "That's good," I said carefully. "That takes courage." "I was so jealous of you," Brittany admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "Even when you were struggling, even when we were making fun of you, I was jealous. Because you had the guts to leave, to try, to risk everything, and I stayed because I was terrified. Terrified of failing, terrified of disappointing Dad, terrified of finding out I wasn't as special as everyone told me I was." I felt something shift in my chest, a softening I hadn't expected. "Brittany, I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, finally looking directly at me. "I was cruel to you for years. I tore you down because building myself up felt impossible. That's not an excuse, just the truth. But I wanted you to know that watching you succeed, watching you build something real and meaningful, it woke something up in me. You showed me that it was possible to be more than what we were raised to be." We stood there in uncomfortable silence, two sisters who barely knew each other, separated by years of rivalry and resentment. "I hope your company does well," I said finally. "Really, I mean that." "Thank you." Brittany smiled sadly. "Maybe someday we could get coffee? Just to talk, no agenda. I'd like to know the real you, not the version I invented in my head to justify my own insecurities." "Maybe," I said, and I meant it. "Not now, not soon, but maybe someday." "I need time, Brittany. A lot of time." "I understand." She nodded, turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I know that doesn't mean much coming from me, but it's true. You're extraordinary, Riley. You always were." She walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd of graduates and families. I stood there, processing what had just happened. This small moment of honesty between two people who had been adversaries for so long. I didn't know if Brittany and I would ever have a real relationship. I didn't know if the damage was too deep, the hurt too ingrained. But for the first time, I felt like maybe it was possible. Not necessary, but possible. That night, I returned to the yacht. It had become my sanctuary, the place I went when I needed to think, to process, to simply be. I anchored in a quiet spot off Montrose Harbor, watching the city lights dance on the water. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Miss Thorne?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "This is Margaret Walsh from the MacArthur Foundation. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss your work with the Riley Thorne Foundation. We're considering you for a fellowship." I sat down hard on the deck bench. The MacArthur Fellowship, the so-called Genius Grant, was one of the most prestigious awards in the country. $625,000, no strings attached, given to people who showed extraordinary creativity and promise. I'm honored." I managed. "Absolutely, I'd love to discuss it." After we hung up, I sat there in the darkness, overwhelmed. 7 years ago, I had been sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment, eating ramen because it was all I could afford, wondering if I had made a catastrophic mistake. And now this. I thought about calling someone, sharing the news, but then I realized I didn't need to. This moment, this success, it didn't need witnesses to be real. It didn't need validation or celebration or acknowledgement from anyone else. It was enough that I knew, that I felt it, that I had built a life so far beyond what anyone, including myself, had imagined possible. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to the Chicago skyline, to the city that had watched me fall and rise and fall and rise again. "Here's to the long game," I whispered. "Here's to the people who said no, because they taught me to say yes to myself. Here's to every closed door that forced me to build my own entrance. Here's to failure, because it taught me I could survive. And here's to success, because it taught me that survival was never the goal. The goal was always to thrive. The water lapped softly against the hull. Somewhere in the city, in the building I owned, in the offices of companies I had never heard of, people were using designs my team had created. Students were receiving grants from my foundation, pursuing dreams that might have died without that support. A whole ecosystem of creativity and possibility existed because I had refused to accept someone else's definition of my limitations. I leaned back against the cushions and closed my eyes, feeling the gentle rock of the boat, the cool breeze off the lake, the weight of everything I'd accomplished settling over me like a comfortable blanket. For the first time in my entire life, I felt complete. Not because of what I had, but because of who I had become. Not despite my family's rejection, but because of it. They had tried to make me small, and in doing so, they had given me the motivation to become vast. I had spent so many years trying to earn love I was never going to receive, approval that was never going to come. And when I finally stopped trying, when I finally accepted that I was enough exactly as I was, the world had opened up in ways I couldn't have predicted. The revenge I had fantasized about, the moment of triumph over the people who had doubted me, turned out to be hollow compared to this. The real victory wasn't in their acknowledgement of my success. It was in my complete indifference to whether they acknowledged it or not. I had built an empire, but more importantly, I had built a self I could be proud of. A self that was kind, generous, creative, and resilient. A self that helped others climb the same mountains I had scaled. A self that measured success not in dollars or awards or recognition, but in impact and authenticity, and the courage to keep growing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "The team wants to know if you're coming to the office tomorrow. We're all dying to celebrate the Northwestern thing. Also, someone from the Wall Street Journal called about an interview." I smiled, typing back. "Let's do lunch at that taco place everyone loves. My treat. And tell WSJ I'll do the interview, but only if they let me talk about the foundation and the importance of supporting young artists." "You're the best boss ever," Jamie replied with a string of celebration emojis. I set down the phone and looked up at the stars, barely visible through Chicago's light pollution, but there nonetheless, constant and distant and indifferent to earthly drama. My mother used to tell me that the stars didn't care if anyone was watching them shine, they just shone because that's what stars did. For years, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was just being poetic, offering comfort that didn't quite connect. But now I got it. She had been telling me that my light, my purpose, my value, it existed independent of anyone's recognition, that I could shine in an empty room, and it would matter just as much as shining on a stage. That the act of being authentically myself was enough, regardless of who applauded. I wished I could tell her I finally understood. I wished I could show her everything I had built, every life I had touched through the foundation, every dream I had helped make possible. I wished I could introduce her to the woman I had become, strong and successful and scarred but whole. But maybe she already knew. Maybe wherever she was, she had always known this was how it would turn out. That the daughter everyone else had underestimated would become exactly who she was meant to be. The city glittered before me, full of possibility and promise. Tomorrow, I would go to the office and celebrate with my team. Next week, I would meet with the MacArthur people. Next month, I would open a new branch of Ascension in Boston. Next year, who knew? But tonight, I was just Riley Thorne, a woman on a boat, watching her city sleep, finally, completely, triumphantly at peace. I had forgiven my father, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to be free of the anger. I had left the door open for Brittany, not because I owed her anything, but because growth deserved acknowledgement. I had built something extraordinary, not to prove anyone wrong, but because creating was in my blood, and I had learned, finally, that the only approval I ever needed was my own. The walls I had built around my heart, the fortress I had constructed to protect myself from further rejection, they were still there, but they had windows now. Light could get in. Carefully chosen people could get in. Love, on my terms, could get in. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that lobby a year ago, terrified but determined. I was someone better, someone who had learned that victory isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about becoming so authentically yourself that their opinions become irrelevant. As the night deepened and the city lights blurred into watercolor streaks on the dark lake, I made myself a promise. I would never again measure my worth by someone else's yardstick. I would never again shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. I would never again apologize for taking up space, for dreaming big, for believing I deserved everything I had worked for. I was Riley Thorne. Dropout, dreamer, designer, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and most importantly, a woman who had taken every ounce of doubt, every moment of rejection, every attempt to diminish her, and transformed it into fuel for the most spectacular success story she could imagine. The walls they had tried to build around me had become the foundation of my empire, and I was just getting started.